There is a striking new addition to the skyline in Doha. But it isn't a skyscraper. It isn't even a building. It's a sculpture rising 80 feet into the air at the end of a new public park. This giant tower of steel is called Seven, and it's the creation of an American artist, Richard Serra.
I think Richard Serra is the greatest 20th century artist. He's had major exhibitions worldwide in museums and in galleries. And we're very lucky and excited to have a work of his in Doha. It's a beautiful sculpture, very minimal, timeless as a piece. It's a major work by a major artist.
It's been a long 3-year journey to bring Richard Serra's sculpture to Doha. It was inspired by the completion of the magnificent Museum of Islamic Art, designed by international architect I.M. Pei.
I think it's very important to have someone like Richard Serra construct a sculpture for the Museum of Islamic Art. It's definitely a landmark in Doha. You really can't miss it. It's there when you come out of the airport. You can see it from old Doha, you can see it from new Doha. So it's really in a spectacular position. And now with the Richard Serra sculpture, we have both our flagships in Doha. One is the flagship museum and the other is the flagship major sculpture. I think this is part of the transition that the whole of Qatar is going through. You know, we're experiencing so many new things. And this is a wonderful chance that we're inviting a major international artist to come and do a work for the first time in the Middle East.
We wanted to have a masterpiece sculpture, so my husband and I had dinner with I.M. Pei, the architect of the Museum of Islamic Art in New York, and we said, look, we would really like for you to suggest somebody who'd you like to honor your contribution to the Middle East. And he suggested Richard Serra.
There are very few sculptors that can handle this kind of scale. Richard Serra was the first one on my mind, and I think probably on Sheikh Maes's one, because he's sort of a site-specific artist. And the scale of the location is not something you deal with a tiny little piece of sculpture. You have something very strong and powerful, very assertive.
It wasn't a discussion or a negotiation between a number of artists. It was one selection, one nomination, and we went for it.
But Richard Serra is no conventional artist. For over 40 years, he has been making art that has challenged the idea of what sculpture can be. Enormously big and enormously heavy, his work is made up of huge slabs of raw, undecorated steel.
I told them what they were getting into. I told them that I was going to build a very industrial-looking work, and people will be probably taken aback with the fact that it is, in a sense, brute. This piece is made of 7 steel plates. Each plate is about 8 feet wide, 4 inches thick, and almost 80 feet high. We're talking about a plate that's 55 ton. 7 plates, 55 ton each, is 385 ton. So some people may be startled. Some people may not even think it's sculpture. I didn't want to build a piece that was just about Richard Serra building a sculpture. I wanted to make a contribution that doesn't necessarily just deal with art, deals with this place and this culture. And I thought long about that, and that's why I started really delving into the history of minarets. And I looked at the entire history of minarets, from Spain to Yemen. And all of a sudden I saw that my work falls into that vocabulary also. I have a vocabulary of building towers and vertical structures, and being able to dovetail into an existing iconography in the Arab culture gave me a lot of confidence that I was probably on the right track.
Inspired by the towering shapes of ancient minarets, Richard Serra went back to his studio in New York to work out the actual form of his very modern sculpture.
I don't start with a drawing. I'm a model maker, and I went through a lot of models. I went through 5-plate models, a lot of 6-plate models, 8-plate models. Sheikh Mayasa and Sheikh Hazim, they came often. And then when we got to 7 plates, they thought, oh, we can do this. And when you come to 7, the piece turns quicker and it has more.
We looked at each one and he explained the philosophy between each one, and we chose the one we liked most. And it happened to be the one he liked most, so there was no arguments there. It was a very quick decision.
Can you go inside that thing?
You can go inside. It's about 4 feet wide here. The distance inside.
At the final presentation, they were joined by the museum's architect, I.M. Pei.
How big is the circle?
Here, from the outside, you're about 12 feet. On the inside, you're about 10 feet.
10 feet.
So that was a big day for me because I could see it. Their eyes lit up. They thought, yes, we're going to go ahead with this. But then it took another year to make the steel.
Richard Serra invents his sculptures in his studio, but they are made in this industrial foundry in Germany. It's one of the few places in the world that can make steel of such huge scale. Producing the plates is dramatic and hot, with temperatures reaching up to 1400 degrees centigrade.
The sheer alchemy of the event is breathtaking. I mean, you're watching molten metal pour like a river, and then it hardens, so there's nothing quite like that. It's really an event. Steel mills are like big bakeries. They just roll and cut. You order an ingot, which is a pour into a form. And from that ingot, you roll. And the plate's rolled again and again and again till it gets to the thickness of what you want and the length of what you want. And then the ends are cut, square cut. And then you have it.
Finally, the 80-foot steel plates arrived in Doha. With construction of the sculpture park already well underway, it was now time for Richard Serra's tower to be assembled. It's a demanding job. Over 7 nights, an international crew would carefully hoist each plate upright and move it into position. But on the first night, not even the artist himself knew how it would go.
I was excited to see the site, I was excited to see the scale of the place and the job, but I won't be confident about the character of the piece until the piece is finished. Usually if the job starts well, you think it's going to continue well, but there aren't any guarantees. From what I can gather, there's a pretty good atmosphere, given the fact that it's hot, it's dusty, everyone's throat's burning, but people are fairly calm, and people understand that when you have a 55-ton plate in the air, you have to pay attention. So there's a certain respect for the endeavor that's going on, and respect for the effort that people are putting into the job, and That's very satisfying.
With just one plate towering into the night sky, it was already clear that Richard Serra's unique approach to sculpture would be like nothing Doha had experienced before.
We were following the installation, and at first it was a shock. I think people are very curious. I've had many questions, people asking me, what is that at the end of the promenade? I don't know if very many people understand it yet. Although art is not new to the region, but I think contemporary art and the way it's expressed is quite new. So I think that's really important. If the history of Richard Serra and his previous sculptures is understood, then people will be able to appreciate it much more.
Richard Serra's art reflects the industrial look of the modern world. Cities, bridges, skyscrapers. His obsession with heavy industrial materials began long before he even became an artist. It goes back to his childhood, growing up in the 1940s in San Francisco.
When I was about 4, my father took me to a launching of the ship at Marin Shipyard. And all of a sudden, the ship was rolled down the planks, and the beams came out, and the ship submerged in the water. And then it reappeared, and it was afloat. I was astounded because before, when I saw the ship, it looked like a skyscraper, obdurate and inert, lying on its side, and looked like it weighed tons. And now you had a ship that was free afloat and adrift in the water, and it was weightless. And that transition from something that seemed heavy and massive to something that was lyrical and afloat and balanced seemed to be almost a magical transformation. And I never got over it. And it became a reoccurring dream. A dream that stayed with me almost all my life. You can say, what does that dream mean? Well, I guess if you're a sculptor, it has something to do with the potential of the transformation of matter going to something that contains weight to being something weightless.
Richard Serra's enormous constructions all go back to this key idea: to transform enormous plates of steel that weigh many tons into sculptures that appear lyrical and weightless. No matter how big or how complex, they have the optical illusion of defying gravity. He's been experimenting with weightlessness right from his earliest work. In 1969, he balanced 4 lead plates against each other so that a whole ton of material supported itself in the middle of the floor. He called it House of Cards.
There's something about balance. That seems to be an aspect of construction that's always interested me. I've gone back to the basic principles of gravity in order to make my sculpture. So each piece that I make, it is self-supporting. The tectonics of the piece is that if you remove one plate, the whole piece collapses. If you take the piece in Qatar, like in all the curved pieces I make, the principle of all those pieces goes back to the simple balance of the House of Cards.
But at 80 feet tall, the Doha sculpture is the tallest Serra has ever made. It's too risky to just let it stand alone. So once each plate reaches its spot, it has to be firmly secured to the base.
The reason that you have to have anchor bolts and pylons and whatever is we've got 385 tons here. You can't put a piece up with this tendency to overturn with winds and storms and rain and whatever without anchoring it into the ground.
It's the fourth night, and work has been running smoothly. The crew is installing the fourth plate, but the sculpture is still a work in progress.
If you ask me, how do I feel about the job right now? Great. On the other hand, you always have doubt, and you really don't know how the piece is going to function on the site until you start putting pieces up. I'm not going to be completely over my anxiety until the whole job comes together, because you never know what cow's going to knock over the fence.
With the sculpture beginning to make its mark on the Doha skyline, Their Excellencies Sheikh Mayasa bint Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani and Sheikh Jassim bin Abdul Aziz Al Thani visit the site for the first time to see how the work is shaping up.
And there are only 4 plates up, there are 3 more. There's another plate that's going to come on the right-hand side, which is even going to make it a little wider, and it's going to tail in much like the plate on the left-hand side. So when these two people...
Richard has been a great choice. He's been very committed to the work. He's been very committed to us.
There's some water got through, so it's a little less.
I think it's like delivering a baby. We were first in his studio about 2 or 3 years ago now, seeing his models. So it was very impressive to see the journey of the sculpture from the models to the actual installation of the work.
Soon after, Their Excellencies are joined by 2 more distinguished guests. His Highness Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, the Emir of Qatar, and Her Highness Sheikha Moza bint Nasser Al Misned.
This is the placement in relation to the corniche, in relation to the museum. When you look through, you see the entire museum. On one side of the pier, steps all the way down. People can see.
His Highness the Emir and Her Highness Sheikha Moza have given us full support to go ahead and take risks in working with different artists. So it was important for us to take them on the site to see the art, to meet the artist, visit the site before it's complete, just to get an idea of what the final product is going to look like.
I know that Sheikh Moza and the Emir were very impressed because he told me. There's no way of anticipating how he would have thought about looking at a large structure like that. One doesn't know. I thought it was touching, actually, in a real way, that he had a great deal of pride in the fact that it was there. You could see it. It was fulfilling for me that he took that much pride in it.
So far, the Doha sculpture has met with approval, but commissioning the piece has been a bold move. For Serra's brutal and uncompromising work can be controversial and is not to everyone's taste.
I think any artist provokes, and I think that's the beauty of art. And every time you choose an artist, you take a risk, and that's the kind of people we like to work with. We're not against artists who have an opinion or want to do something that is outside of the box. So I hope that people like it, but for those who don't like it, I would respect, their opinion, because, as I said, art it's a matter of taste. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
An important aspect of Richard Serra's sculptures is that they're not just about how they look. They are also about how they feel. He wants everyone who comes into contact with his work to have a unique physical sensation.
There is a kind of reverence about Serra's sculpture that I think is brought by its scale and its power. There's something awesome about the capabilities of an artist to take materials of that weight and strength and shape and do something tangible with them that goes beyond their own dimension of meaning as a material. I think it has in its power the sense of physicality. Have stood inside his extraordinary steel pieces that seem to crush you with their beauty. It's a powerful experience.
I think up to a point, there was a lot of resistance to my sculpture. And then several years went by and I had the show of the torqued ellipses. People were startled by it. People immediately recognized it wasn't something that they were familiar with. I remember people going in and trying to walk around the room in a circle, trying to touch the wall to try to figure out how close they were and far away from it.
These works are made from 12-foot-high steel plates, twisted and curved in a unique geometrical shape. Walking through, the walls bend inwards and outwards, creating a dizzying sensation that seems to distort perspective and balance.
I went in there one Saturday and there were 30 people sitting inside of one of those pieces. I was gratified. I thought, wow, there's an audience for this work. I didn't expect that to happen.
You feel the power of his work. You know, of course you feel it when you look at it, but you feel it even more as you move around and through it. To really appreciate them, you have to actually go inside and walk around. It's not two-dimensional looking at. It's not three-dimensional, but it's actually four-dimensional, which I think is really quite wonderful.
Well, I deal with the construction of space. I'm interested in how does the steel contain and shape the space? How does the steel make a path that leads you into and through and around it? So if you ask me what my subject matter is, it's not steel, it's space. I think if you think it's, quote, sculpture, you're liable to be put off just by that name. The interesting thing about a lot of this work is you don't have to know anything about anything to understand it. You can just walk in and have the experience.
It's the last night. The crew is about to install the 7th and final plate. And then Richard Serra's 385-ton tower will be a permanent landmark in the Doha Bay.
You don't know how people are going to relate to it. I understand that some people are going to look at it and say, why is that industrial eyesore out there? They look at steel and they think, rusty old steel or decaying old rot. There may be approval, there may be disapproval, there may be pride. You don't know. All you can do is provide an opportunity for an experience and let the chips fall where they may. I mean, I think there's a satisfaction in a job well done. I think the people who are working on the piece realize that even if they don't understand the concept, understand that they're doing something that has some significance. They understand it's meaningful.
And finally, it's over. The artist congratulates each member of his crew on a job well done.
When I saw the plates coming, I think, how this can be a sculpture. Now, it looks unbelievable.
I never believe it's possible in 1 week. I was thinking it will take like maybe 2-3 weeks. It's great, and I have a tremendous satisfaction. It's one of the most beautiful works that I ever done in my life, if not the most beautiful one.
It's quite an impressive piece of art. Personally, I would be very proud to have such a thing in my garden or in my backyard, but I'm very happy with the result, absolutely.
The next day, Richard Serra and some of his team take a boat trip around the harbour. It's been an intense 3-year process from model to steel mill to construction. Only now can Serra see exactly what he has created.
Let's just say that I'm relieved and I'm exhausted. Exhausted because it's a combination just of the physical drain of getting it done and the anxiety of having it go up. But if I had some doubt, I have less doubt now. Am I happy? I'm absolutely thrilled. I wanted to make a space that was both public but intimate. Large public space that people could come to, they could gather, and then they could go into, and when they were inside this sanctuary, they could look up at the height of almost 80 feet and look out of an aperture that's a pretty precise 7-sided form and have a private personal experience.
Once the whole park is final and we get to actually go inside the sculpture and you feel how monumental it really is, and you'll get a sense of how dwarfed you are, I think you'll really feel the presence of the sculpture. And you feel that it's quite a spiritual place. You can be alone and feel very minute in comparison to the sculpture and really to the world.
But this is not the end of the story. Richard Serra's sculpture is the latest stage of a cultural renaissance in Qatar. A commitment to making inspiring, world-class art available to everyone.
I think any society with a lot of culture and a lot of diversity enhances the quality of life. I think Qatar has made a very important cultural statement in opening the Museum of Islamic Art. We're all about reclaiming our history, our past, our identity, yet embracing contemporary culture. His Highness the Emir loves art, he loves culture, and he wants to give the people here this opportunity to enrich in their lives with different forms of art, different forms of visual culture. Personally, I'm very happy with the work. It's a beautiful sculpture. For me, it's really a masterwork of Richard, and I think it's one of his best pieces in public space. So in that sense, I think we're very lucky.